They say safety is the most dangerous drug. It lulls you, softens you, makes you think you'll never crave the chaos you swore you'd outgrown. I was 26 when I met Daniel. My name is Amelia, and back then, I thought I'd finally outgrown the version of me who chased trouble just to feel alive. Daniel wasn't the kind of man I usually noticed. No tattoos peeking from under his sleeves, no reckless grin that promised danger. He was steady, solid. The kind of man who listens more than he talks and remembers things you said in passing weeks later. Our first date was nothing flashy, just a quiet dinner at a little Italian place where the waiter knew his name. But when Daniel looked at me across the table and asked about my favorite book instead of my job, I felt something I'd never felt before: seen. Within 6 months, we were living together. By the end of the year, I was walking down an aisle in a lace dress I'd picked on a whim, saying vows I thought I understood. He gave me stability. A 2-story home with a mortgage in both our names. Weekends spent fixing up the garden. A dog named Cooper who adored him almost as much as I did. I should have been happy. And for a while, I was. But happiness has a way of turning into routine. And routine, if you're wired like me, can start to feel like suffocation. I told myself it was just an adjustment, that everyone misses the early rush, the butterflies, the hunger, that real love isn't supposed to feel like fireworks all the time. Still, there were nights I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering if this was it, if this was the whole story. I didn't know then that my craving for something more would lead me straight into the biggest mistake of my life, or that the man I promised forever to would one day look at me like a stranger, and it would all start with a message I should have deleted before I ever opened it. It came on a Wednesday night, just after 10 p.m. Daniel was upstairs finishing a report for work, and I was curled on the couch, scrolling mindlessly through my phone. That's when the notification lit up my screen. A name I hadn't seen in over 2 years. Aaron. My chest tightened instantly. He wasn't just some ex. He was the personification of every bad decision I'd ever made, the guy who could disappear for weeks, then show up at midnight with that dangerous smile and a story that made me forget why I hated him. I'd promised myself I was done with men like that, men who lived like the rules didn't apply to them, men who made you feel high one minute and hollow the next. I should have deleted the message. I should have blocked his number and gone back to pretending he didn't exist. Instead, I opened it. Saw something today that made me think of you. Hope you're good. It was nothing. And it was everything. I told myself replying was harmless. A polite, hope you're good too, to close the door for good. But Aaron didn't deal in doors. He dealt in cracks. And he knew exactly how to wedge himself back in. One message turned into 3. 3 turned into an almost daily back and forth. Little check-ins, old jokes, late-night confessions, stretching over the next 2 weeks. Each time I thought the conversation was fading, he'd find a way to pull me back in. So when he finally suggested meeting up, I laughed it off in the moment. But the seed was already planted, watered by 14 days of texts that made me feel more awake than I had in months. And the truth is, life with Daniel, as safe and stable as it was, had begun to feel like a photograph fading in the sun. Aaron was color. When I finally agreed to meet him just for coffee, I told myself it was for closure. But the second I saw him standing outside that cafe, leaning against the brick wall like no time had passed, I knew I wasn't there to close anything. I was there to reopen it, and I had no idea that single choice would lead to the moment Daniel would look at me like I'd set fire to everything we'd built. And maybe I had. It was a Tuesday morning when the nausea hit. Not the kind you get from bad takeout or too much wine, the kind that makes you instinctively count days in your head. I'd been careful with Aaron, at least I thought I had, but careful was a flexible word when I was with him. And with Daniel, we hadn't exactly been trying, but we hadn't been not trying either. I told myself the timing was impossible, that it had to be Daniel's. Still, by the time I was standing in the pharmacy aisle staring at a wall of pregnancy tests, my hands were shaking. I bought 2. Took them both the moment I got home. 2 lines. On both. My first thought was Daniel. My second thought, the one I shoved down so fast it made me dizzy, was Aaron. I sat on the bathroom floor for almost an hour, knees pulled to my chest, doing mental gymnastics with the dates. If I pushed one memory forward and another one back, I could make it fit. I could make the story work. And that's when the decision happened. Not in words, not in some big conscious moment. Just a quiet, undeniable choice. This would be Daniel's baby. That night, I told him, not with fear, not with hesitation, with a smile so convincing I almost believed it myself. I wrapped the test in tissue paper and tucked it into a gift bag, along with a pair of tiny white socks I'd picked up on the way home. His reaction? God. The way his face lit up, the way his hands shook as he held me, the way he whispered, "We're going to be parents," like it was the best sentence he'd ever said, it should have made me feel pure joy. Instead, it made the guilt settle deeper, like a stone at the bottom of my stomach. The next morning I blocked Aaron's number, deleted every message, every photo, every trace. In my mind, erasing him from my phone was the same as erasing him from my life. What I didn't understand yet was that lies don't disappear just because you hit delete. They wait, they grow, they learn how to breathe on their own. And mine was already learning how to crawl. For the first couple of months, I thought I'd pulled it off. Daniel was all in, reading parenting books before bed, researching car seats like he was building a spaceship, running his hand over my stomach like he could already feel our future taking shape beneath my skin. The more excited he got, the easier it was to pretend. And for a while, I almost convinced myself it was real. But then came the little moments. Tiny cracks in the glass. It started with a comment from his sister over dinner. "Wow, you two didn't waste any time. Quick work, Dan." It was meant as a joke, but Daniel looked at me just a second too long before laughing it off. Then his cousin, a nurse, started asking specific questions about my due date, conception timing, growth milestones, the kind of questions that made my pulse jump because I had to run my mental script before answering. And then there were Daniel's questions, subtle at first. "Remind me again when you found out you were ovulating. Was it that weekend we went to the cabin?" I always had an answer ready, always with a smile, always believable. Until one night I caught him looking at my old Instagram posts, scrolling back to months before the pregnancy. "What are you doing?" I asked. He shrugged, too casually. "Just looking at our old photos." But I could see it, that flicker in his eyes. The flicker of someone connecting dots. The first time I found the folded piece of paper in his desk, I didn't know what it was. A week later, I saw it again, this time open, a printed order form for a prenatal DNA kit. I stared at it so long my vision blurred. It felt like my skin had gone cold, like my blood knew before my brain did. He didn't trust me. That night, I tried to derail him, leaning against the kitchen counter in his favorite dress, laughing too much, asking if we could go away for a weekend before the baby came. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Over the next week, I threw everything at him. Guilt, tears, even anger. "How could you accuse me of something like this while I'm carrying our child? Do you have any idea what stress like this does to a pregnancy?" But he didn't accuse. He didn't defend. He just kept repeating, calmly, infuriatingly, "If there's nothing to worry about, the test won't be a problem." That calm was worse than shouting, because it meant he'd already decided, and deep down, I knew the moment those results came back, my perfect little story would shatter, and there would be no way to tape it back together. The morning the results came, the air in the house felt heavy. Daniel had taken the day off work, a fact that told me more than any words could. I was in the kitchen, making coffee I wouldn't drink, when the email notification pinged on his phone. He didn't look at me, just unlocked it, opened the message, and started reading. I watched his eyes move across the screen, slow at first, then faster. His shoulders straightened, his jaw tightened. And then, without a word, he set the phone down. The silence stretched so long I felt my chest ache. I wanted to speak, to say something, but my throat was dry. And then it happened. the thing I'll regret for the rest of my life. A laugh. Small at first, then sharper, higher, like it belonged to someone else. Not the laugh of someone who found something funny, but the hysterical, wrong-timed sound of a person whose panic had nowhere to go. Daniel's head snapped toward me. "You're laughing?" His voice was quiet, but it cut straight through me. I tried to explain that it wasn't a real laugh, that it was shock, that my brain had short-circuited. But every word I said sounded pathetic, defensive, hollow. "It's not what you think," I stammered. I convinced myself it was yours. I wanted it to be yours." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't throw anything. But the look on his face, it was worse than shouting. "You wanted it to be mine?" he said, almost to himself. "But it's not. And you knew there was a chance. And you let me—" He stopped, like the rest of the sentence was too bitter to swallow. I stepped toward him. "Daniel, please." He stepped back. "Don't. Just don't touch me right now." The next hour was a blur. Daniel moving through the house like a man on a mission, pulling clothes from drawers, stuffing them into a bag. I followed him from room to room, begging, apologizing, bargaining. "We can get through this," I said. "You've already bonded with the baby. We can still be a family." He zipped the bag shut and looked at me like I was a stranger in his home. "I already have been a family," he said. "Turns out it was just me." The last thing he did before walking out was take down our wedding photo from the wall, set it face down on the table, and pick up his keys. No slammed doors, no final words, just the sound of him leaving, and me, standing in the quiet, realizing that laugh, that stupid, misplaced laugh, had just cost me everything. The days after Daniel left felt like a slow-motion car crash. I kept expecting him to text, to ask how I was feeling, to say he needed time but we could talk. Instead, I got silence. And then, exactly 9 days later, an envelope from his lawyer. The divorce papers were clinical, cold. Every clause was another reminder that this wasn't a fight we'd recover from. It was an ending. I signed them because I didn't know what else to do, because some part of me thought maybe giving him what he wanted would make him see I was still the woman he married. It didn't. A month later, I ran into a mutual friend at the grocery store. She looked surprised to see me, and even more surprised when I told her Daniel and I weren't speaking. "You didn't know?" she asked. "Know what?" She hesitated. "He's seeing someone. Actually, it's—" She stopped, biting her lip. "It's Emily." I blinked. "Emily who?" Her eyes softened. "Emily, his ex-fiancée." The name hit like a fist. The same Emily he once told me had broken his heart so badly he swore he'd never go back. The same Emily whose name I'd only heard in stories. Stories about betrayal, about walking away without explanation. Apparently she'd walked back in, and it got worse. The friend leaned in, lowering her voice. "She's pregnant. I think that's why they got back together so fast." My knees went weak. I gripped the edge of my cart just to stay standing. I managed to smile, nod, say something like "good for him" before walking away, but inside, something cracked so deeply I could almost hear it. Because in that moment, I realized the brutal symmetry of it all. I had been lying to him about a baby that wasn't his. And he had been building a life with a baby that wasn't mine. Two separate betrayals circling each other in silence. Neither of us the victim we pretended to be. Now, when I rock my daughter to sleep at night, I sometimes wonder if somewhere across town, Daniel is doing the same, holding Emily's child, telling himself the same lie I once clung to. That love is enough to make the truth disappear. But the truth never disappears. It just waits for the right moment to ruin you.